Have you ever given your best years to a company, only to discover the company never belonged to you the way you belonged to it? Before we begin, if this story feels familiar, subscribe to the channel. Share it with someone who spent years being loyal to a job that never returned the favor. And in the comments, tell us, what was the hardest lesson your career ever taught you? Because for many people in Generation X, loyalty wasn't just a workplace value. It was a promise. A promise that turned out to be far more fragile than anyone imagined. I still remember my first real job. Not the temporary jobs. Not the summer work. I mean the first job that felt like adulthood. The kind where you received an employee badge and suddenly felt like your life had begun. Back then, the message was simple. Show up. Work hard. Stay loyal. And eventually everything would work out. It wasn't just something managers said. Parents said it. Teachers said it. Television said it. The culture itself repeated the same belief over and over again. Find a good company. Stick with it. Give them your best years. And they'll take care of you. For Gen X, this wasn't considered naive. It was considered common sense. Many of us watched our parents spend decades at the same company. Some worked 20 years. Some worked 30. Some retired from the very place where they started. The system seemed stable. Predictable. Almost permanent. So when we entered the workforce, we carried that expectation with us. Not because we were foolish. Because it was the world we inherited. And for a while, it seemed true. I remember staying late. Not because anyone forced me. Because I believed it mattered. I believed somebody noticed. I believed sacrifice would eventually be rewarded. When projects fell behind, I volunteered. When coworkers called in sick, I covered shifts. When management needed help, I stepped forward. I thought I was building something. Not just a career. A reputation. The kind of reputation that would protect me someday. I thought loyalty was like money in a savings account. Every extra effort. Every missed family dinner. Every weekend sacrificed. Every personal dream postponed. I believed it was accumulating somewhere. Waiting to pay dividends later. Many Gen X workers believed the same thing. We weren't chasing fame. We weren't chasing influence. Most of us simply wanted stability. We wanted to earn our place. And we thought loyalty was the path. Then something strange started happening. The rules began changing. Quietly at first. Almost invisibly. The company that once felt like a family started sounding more like a machine. New executives arrived. New policies appeared. New buzzwords filled meetings. Restructuring. Optimization. Efficiency. Streamlining. Suddenly people weren't employees anymore. They were numbers. Metrics. Costs. Resources. The language changed. And when language changes, reality usually follows. Many of us didn't notice immediately. We kept doing what we'd always done. Working harder. Staying loyal. Trusting the system. But the system had already changed. We just hadn't realized it yet. Then came the layoffs. For some people it happened in the 1990s. For others, the early 2000s. For many, it happened during the financial crisis. Different years. Same story. The shock wasn't simply losing the job. The shock was discovering who lost it. Not the lazy employees. Not the troublemakers. Not the people who barely contributed. Sometimes it was the most loyal person in the building. The employee who had spent 20 years there. The person everyone respected. The person who never complained. The person who believed. One day they were part of the family. The next day security was escorting them out. That image stayed with many of us. Because it shattered something bigger than employment. It shattered faith. I remember watching coworkers pack their desks. Photos. Awards. Certificates. Coffee mugs collected over decades. Tiny artifacts of an entire career. And what struck me wasn't how much they were taking. It was how much they were leaving behind. Entire chapters of their lives. Relationships. Memories. Sacrifices. Years that could never be recovered. Yet the company continued operating as if nothing happened. Meetings resumed. Emails continued. Deadlines remained. The machine kept moving. And for the first time, many Gen X workers understood a painful truth. The company might appreciate your work. But it cannot love you back. Not the way a family does. Not the way a friend does. Not the way a community does. Because companies are designed to survive. Not to be loyal. If this story resonates with you so far, take a moment to like the video. It helps this message reach people who spent years wondering why loyalty never paid off the way they were promised. And I'd love to hear your story in the comments. Because I know many people are carrying this experience quietly. The hardest part wasn't losing jobs. The hardest part was questioning ourselves afterward. Maybe I should have left sooner. Maybe I should have negotiated harder. Maybe I should have taken more risks. Maybe I should have looked after myself the way the company looked after itself. Those thoughts can stay with a person for years. Especially for Gen X. We were raised to believe perseverance was a virtue. And it is. But nobody taught us the difference between perseverance and self-sacrifice. Nobody taught us that loyalty becomes dangerous when it only flows in one direction. Nobody taught us that staying isn't always noble. Sometimes staying is simply fear disguised as commitment. That's a difficult thing to admit. Especially when you've built your identity around being dependable. One lesson many Gen X workers learn too late is that organizations change faster than memories. The manager who hired you leaves. The executive who respected you retires. The leadership team changes. The culture shifts. And suddenly the company you were loyal to no longer exists. The logo remains. The building remains. The name remains. But the people and values that earned your loyalty may be long gone. Yet we kept acting as if the relationship was unchanged. As if yesterday's promises still applied. As if history guaranteed the future. It didn't. What's interesting is that many Gen X workers didn't become cynical after these experiences. They became wiser. There's a difference. Cynicism says nobody deserves trust. Wisdom says trust should be earned repeatedly. Cynicism closes doors. Wisdom pays attention. Many of us eventually realized loyalty itself wasn't the problem. Blind loyalty was. Being committed to your work isn't wrong. Being dependable isn't wrong. Having integrity isn't wrong. Those qualities still matter. The mistake was assuming those qualities automatically created security. Because they don't. The workplace changed. And the rules changed with it. Today, younger generations often approach careers differently. They switch jobs more often. They negotiate more aggressively. They prioritize work-life balance. And sometimes Gen X looks at them with confusion. But if we're honest, part of that confusion comes from recognizing something. They learned from our experience. They watched what happened to loyal employees. They watched people give 30 years to a company and leave with a cardboard box. They watched careers disappear overnight. They watched promises evaporate. And they adapted. In some ways, they inherited lessons we learned the hard way. As I look back now, I don't regret working hard. I don't regret caring. I don't regret trying to do good work. What I regret is believing that loyalty was a contract. Because it wasn't. It was a choice. A personal value. And personal values only remain healthy when they're balanced with self-respect. The truth is simple. Your loyalty should never cost you your future. Your commitment should never require you to ignore reality. And your identity should never depend entirely on an employer. Because jobs end. Companies change. Industries disappear. But your life continues. Perhaps that's the real lesson many Gen X workers eventually discovered. The reward for loyalty was never supposed to come from the company. It comes from knowing you acted with integrity. It comes from knowing you showed up. It comes from knowing you did your best. Those things can never be taken away. The promotion can disappear. The title can vanish. The office can close. The pension can change. But character remains. And maybe that's why so many Gen X workers survive disappointments that would have broken other people. Because beneath the layoffs and broken promises, they carried something stronger. Resilience. Not because life was fair. Because it wasn't. But because they learned how to keep going after discovering the rules weren't what they thought. So if you're someone who spent years being loyal to a company, and you're still carrying disappointment, know that you're not alone. Millions of people live the same story. A story that rarely gets told honestly. A story about faith, work, sacrifice, and unexpected endings. A story about believing loyalty would pay off. And discovering that sometimes it doesn't. But also discovering something else. You are more than your job. More than your title. More than the company name on your business card. And once you understand that, you stop measuring your worth by what an employer gives you. You start measuring it by who you became along the way. If this story spoke to you, subscribe for more reflections on work, life, and the hidden experiences that shaped Generation X. Like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and tell us in the comments. Did loyalty ever pay off for you, or did it teach you a completely different lesson? Thank you for watching. And until next time, take care of yourself because no company ever will as much as you can.